Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to part 2 of our War in the Pacific Admirals Edition play-by-email game against XTRG, where yours truly, the Historical Gamer, is playing as the Allies, and XTRG is playing as the dastardly Imperial Japanese forces about to launch the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, this is turn 2 of this series, and I'm going to have to come up with a better name for the series, frankly, because that's a mouthful. So maybe we'll call it Dueling Destinies or Colliding Destinies or Pacific Inferno. I'm not sure. Something like that. We'll have to come up with something catchy. If you have a good idea, leave it in the comments. But today we're going to be playing the result of Pearl Harbor, so December 7th. So as a reminder, XTRG was free to modify his December 7th plans as he sees fit, with the exception of a few key caveats, like he still has to attack Pearl Harbor, etc. I wasn't able to do too much, like I couldn't send all my forces up on Cap or mass evacuate Pearl Harbor or anything like that. But it is what it is. That was intentional with the hope of giving a little bit more flexibility and variety versus what happened historically, but also not being too ahistorical with just sort of weird results. So with that being said, I've actually already issued the orders for my next turn, December 8th, which we'll get into here in a moment. But let's go ahead and take a look at the results of December 7th. Alright, so we jump in here immediately, and we're going to be calculating range, all these different pop-ups here. We're going to hit the escape button to try and fast forward through some of this. And his immediate attacks are going to start here very shortly. Remember that the game goes through calculating various different types of operations. We've had some Dutch submarines apparently trying to intercept one of his naval convoys to no avail. Now, one other thing worth calling out, that all of these operations that you're going to see unfolding in front of you here are subject to fog of war. So while it may be saying certain things are happening or certain numbers of aircraft are being destroyed or whatnot, that's not necessarily 100% accurate. It's basically highly variable, so you may see 30 enemy zeros shot down when in fact it might have only been 10 or might have only been 15. The results do give you kind of a summation of what's going on and a general sense of what's going on, but they won't give you perfect accuracy. You can see here the attack on Pearl Harbor is occurring. He's attacking with 44 Zero fighter escorts, 126 Val dive bombers, 72 Cape torpedo planes, and you can actually see, as far as I can tell, it looks like the flak is pretty heavy. He's got his Zeros coming in here, flying in what I think is low, strafing Pearl and damaging aircraft, but also being destroyed by flak at quite a heavy rate here. And you can see you're getting different reports on the lower right-hand corner of ships being hit with bombs, etc., etc. We're just going to hit the escape button. It's going to fast forward through all of this, because this would be a rather lengthy combat result if we don't actually do that. So we'll go ahead and jump through all of that, and then we can go ahead and we can read the results here afterwards. Again, fog of war, big caveat, but we're claiming 22 enemy Zeros damaged, 20 destroyed by flak, 3 Kates damaged, 1 destroyed by flak, 7 Vals damaged, 2 destroyed by flak. If those 20 destroyed Zeros are in any way accurate, and the 22 damaged, that's a huge win for us on Pearl, because, again, 20 aircraft destroyed, I think that's more than Japan lost in the entire actual historical attack. You also have to consider the fact that the Imperial Japanese Navy starts off with incredibly high-quality air crews and aircraft, but those diminish rapidly over the course of the war, and it's very difficult for the Japanese to replace those losses. They can do it in the game with some kind of gamey tactics, which I imagine XTRG will have to try and execute to keep his forces at parity for a longer period of time by using like China essentially as a training ground. It's gamey only in the sense that Japan didn't do it historically. But I'm not quite sure how accurate that is, because you can see it's reporting 115 Catalinas damaged on the ground, and that is nowhere near remotely true. Still, if this is, let's say it's 10 and maybe another 10 damaged here, of half those crash on landing, you know, if we can knock out 20 or so of his air crew in the first day, I would consider that a win. You can see here a lot of reports of damaged aircraft. We'll take a closer look after the actual turn. but not much in the way of actual damaged battleships here. You can see Pennsylvania, heavy damage, but that's the only battleship that I see here. Oh, no, Tennessee, also heavy damage. There's only 2 battleships reported as under heavy damage, Maryland as well. But Arizona, okay. West Virginia, damage, but nothing extreme. So we'll have to take a look at that. Oklahoma's not even on fire. So it'll be interesting to see how this actual attack played out. A few casualties, quite a few runway hits, etc. You can see his fighters came in at 100 feet. So they apparently were dropping 60-kilogram bombs and strafing at 100 feet, which lends me to give some credence to those damage reports, because if they're coming in that low, they are subject to heavy damage by flak. Generally, the aircraft will dive if you need them to. I think if you're bringing fighters in at 100 feet, you're asking for trouble, but we'll see how it all plays out. Meanwhile, we're going to move to the Philippines here. You can see he's dropping bombs on the Philippines. We'll fast forward through that as well. This is an attack on Iba, which is an airfield, not the main airfield at Clark Field, but a secondary airfield. A couple of aircraft destroyed on the ground or damaged. Nothing on his end lost. 54 Zeros are attacking Clark Field. We had a couple of fighters up to intercept. I'm assuming once again that he's going to have quite a... Yep, okay, 24 damage, 9 destroyed by flak. Again, he's coming in at 100 feet, which is not how I would play it as the Japanese. But, hey, that's just me. I think that's asking for a lot of trouble. Those aircraft are vulnerable. And frankly, if you come in at like 10,000 feet, they'll dive to strafe. At least that's my understanding of Gary Grigsby games. But it'll dramatically reduce your flak damage. So... keep that in mind. So we'll go ahead and fast forward through. Now he's got bombers coming in, attacking the port at Manila. And you can see here we had a couple of submarines damaged. I did not evacuate my subs from port on turn 1, which I probably should have done, but I didn't. You can see here he's got some Nell bomb... Oh, shit. That are coming in on the Prince of Wales, our warships here in Force Z, which I did not move north to Kota Baru or to Patani, but I did have them at sea down here. I was hoping that maybe he would send some invasion forces to the island of Borneo, and I could intercept him. Instead, he still bombed my force, but fortunately no damage is being done, apparently. Meanwhile, he's got a light carrier force off here, which is bombing some ships of ours in the port of Davao. I believe it is just some transports, though, so I'm hopeful that isn't too much damage. All right, so let's go ahead and fast forward there. You can see it's claiming he sank a a cargo ship, a light cargo ship. AKL means a light cargo ship. With one bomb hit, sunk the Montanas. The Maubun is on fire, and a AVD, which is a destroyer tender, the William B. Preston, also suffered some damage. Okay, so if we go into the Malay Peninsula, you can see here he's bombing Georgetown, which I don't really have a whole bunch of stuff at. We've got a runway there, but there's nothing... I don't think there's anything too concerning there. And a large air raid on Hong Kong, which is to be expected. I imagine a ground assault will begin on Hong Kong before too long. I don't have much in the way of aircraft there, though. Let's kind of fast forward through some of this. I think most of the big stuff has already occurred. So go ahead and jump through some of this. More waves perhaps coming in on Clark Field. Aircraft spotted over all these different units. Perhaps recon. And a lot of different sighting reports. Catalina's spotting enemy transports or enemy task forces underway. Alright, so we've got some Hudsons leaving Kota Baru, attempting to attack his surface task force with the Congo, dropping some bombs there, not doing any damage. We've got some Blenheims as well, again, not doing any damage. Some Ruaways out of Singapore, not doing any damage. Some Buffaloes and Hudsons out of Singapore, not doing any damage. Feels like a common refrain, right? We've got some Swordfish, which those might have a better chance of... Oh, all right. Well, at least, again, remember, this is fog of war contingent, but Swordfishes, which are more ideally suited for torpedo bombing, these are the aircraft that were instrumental in sinking the Bismarck, or at least disabling the Bismarck so it could be sunk. You can see there they're claiming 2 500-pound bomb hits on the Congo. The Congo class are very lightly armed, So they can be somewhat easily damaged. And then the Haruna, which I believe is also a Congo class. They're fast, but they're basically battle cruisers. So again, they're very vulnerable to fire. So hopefully those 2 bombs did some damage and may cause him to pull at least one of his ships out of the line. If they actually hit, again, Fog of War means you never know. And there's a midget sub attack here at Pearl on an AG, which I believe is like a light gun ammo ship. So you can see one of his midgets did make it into the midget submarines, did make it in to Pearl Harbor. You can see he's landing troops at Kotobaru, landing troops at Bataan, not Bataan, but Bataan Island. And that appears to be it. I'm kind of surprised he didn't land on anything on Wake Island, and he didn't land anything on Guam. So that's odd. He's launching an attack here in China, in eastern China, so I have no real hope of holding this area. It's cut off from supplies. Our main Chinese forces are further west. You can see there he just dealt a hearty blow against that Chinese unit. Now, China's hard for him because it's got a lot of our units behind his lines, which makes consolidating a little bit difficult as it was in real life. But if he does attack those Chinese forces that are behind his lines, we don't really have much hope due to supply limitations from fighting back. You can see he drove that one unit back, and he just took the island of Bataan. And I think that's going to about do it for this turn, so why don't we go ahead and jump into my actual save, which is my orders in the next stage. Alright, so we're into December 8th up here, 1941. This is after the results here, and I've actually already issued my orders. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the results that we're claiming here. So we had all the Fog of War stuff come up. We claimed 56 enemy aircraft destroyed by flak. We claimed the enemy lost 16 operational losses, which means damaged planes or any type of plane. As it goes back home and it lands, there's a chance it could be destroyed on landing. So like if you're damaged, there's a greater likelihood that aircraft, it may return its pilot, but it's going to be perhaps written off as a loss, or perhaps it loses its pilot on a crash landing. 3 air-to-air losses for the Japanese. Meanwhile, we're only claiming 30... Now, so this is all Fog of War. On the left, however, here, the Allied loss, and this will update over time, by the way, so these results will change maybe like 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in. As we get better intelligence, these figures can change. But on the left here, you can see that we're claiming 1 loss in air-to-air combat, 38 on the field, 1 by flak, 2 by operational. This is all 100% accurate because we know what we lost ourselves. Now, if we look at this, if this is anywhere near close to reality, this is a tremendous success for us because we're claiming 61 of his losses were zeros, which again, these are the best enemy fighter aircraft. They've got some of the best crews, and frankly, if he's got really good crews on his vals, yeah, that might make him better at bombing my ships, but they're easy to shoot down if he doesn't have any competent escorts around. So this is potentially a really big win for us, even if it's half that number, 30 zeros destroyed in a day. You know, assuming he's got 15 KIA or something like that pilots, that could be a pretty serious loss for him to try and deal with. So it's worth keeping an eye on. Now, in terms of ships sunk, if we go back here, you can see here we have lost 5 ships. The Japanese lost nothing, or we're not claiming they lost anything. We lost 2 PT boats, 1 at Manila, 1 at Pearl Harbor. We lost the AVD, the destroyer tender, the William B. Preston, a 250-kilogram bomb at Davao. Now, you'll remember, according to the battle result, this took 1 bomb and was on fire. Meanwhile, we said we also lost a transport, the Montanas, at Davao as well. So the Fog of War was right on the Montanas. It was wrong on the Preston because it didn't claim the Preston sank, but it obviously did. And then we lost 1 AKL at Manila. Now, let's take a look at Manila, actually, before we get to Pearl Harbor. If we go to Manila, I've issued some orders, but you'll see I lost a AVD, so an aircraft tender, which was badly damaged. It's on fire, 69 fire, 19 engine, 28 float, 58 systems. This systems number will go up as the fire goes down. As fire gets put out, the fire will basically create additional damage to the rest of the ship, so these figures will go up if the fire is able to be controlled. If the fire goes up to 100, the ship will sink as well. We also lost the AS Canopus, or not lost, but it suffered damage. It's a submarine tender, which is really important in our ability to maintain a submarine force out of the Philippines. Those ships allow you to replenish torpedoes at smaller ports that might not actually have the capability to replenish torpedoes, so there's sort of a port size or level, and if a port is below a certain size, you can't reload certain types of things. So battleships can't reload ammos at small atolls with too small ports. Submarines can't reload torpedoes unless the port facilities are large enough, unless there's an AS there, a submarine tender, which would have the torpedoes on board as well. With that being said, the Canopus did suffer some damage. In addition, I did also put some ships into repair. We had 2 submarines, the Sailfish and the Porpoise. Both suffered some damage by enemy air attack. Both reasonably modern submarines here. One of them is the Sarjo class, which I believe might be the newest class, and one's the Porpoise class. But 2 submarines damaged, 70 float damage, 58 float damage, no fires, but the float damage is the Sailfish is gonna be lost. 70 float, by the time that gets under control, the system damage will skyrocket, and there's even if it survives, its speed will probably be so reduced we'll never be able to get it out of there. The Porpoise, we'll see. We might be able to limp it out. I'm trying to repair them in port, so I could improve these numbers because I do have dry docks and capabilities at Manila. But again, the enemy's going to be bombing Manila consistently, so we'll see how that all works out. Meanwhile, I ordered all of the rest of my submarines out of Manila and onto patrols. So most of these are going to be taking place in various patrols down here in the south near Legazpi, where I'm thinking this task force may be about to land some troops on the southern tip of the Philippines. And then I've also got a string of maybe 6 or 7 submarines that are going to take point on the northern edge of the Philippines, near Aparay, Vigan, or Laog. I'm really bad with pronunciations, guys, sorry. But essentially on the northern tip of the Philippines to hopefully intercept any Japanese invasion force, then maybe they'll be able to get into position in time. In addition to that, I have also ordered a submine laying operation, one of them actually with 4 submarines here that are going to be dropping mines in various ports. So dropping mines here, and we're also dropping mines here on the northern and southern tip of Luzon. I know that my torpedoes are going to be very ineffective because the American torpedoes, except for the S-boats, the American torpedoes were inferior at this time. They had a lot of reliability issues. So I've actually decided, hey, if we know our torpedoes are going to be crap and these subs aren't going to be able to do much meaningfully, why not have them drop some minefields that might have a better chance of damaging or destroying some of the Japanese ships than a torpedo might. So that's what we're going to do. We'll lay some minefields and hopefully do some damage there. In addition to that, I'm also trying to get some of these ships out of here, so I've ordered some cargo ships essentially to evacuate to the south, down toward Borneo, and a couple to all the way back to Australia if they can reach it. A surface task force of destroyers is also going to try and escape down toward Borneo. I've got most of my surface fleet, the Asiatic fleet with the Houston and the Marblehead, escaping down here. They'll use this as sort of a temporary base, hopefully to launch out and raid at Japanese shipping as they kind of move in to invade some of these islands. And that's basically what we're doing in the Philippines. In addition to that, our air units are basically being kicked up to alert levels. They didn't do much damage. We've got 40 Warhawks here, you can see, at Manila that are in good shape to fight the enemy. In addition to that, we've got some aircraft at Clark Field, a little bit more damage at Clark Field, but we've got some P-35 fighters, a few Warhawks, no B-17s are in good shape. Clark Field isn't in the best shape. And we've got some at Iba as well. And they're basically all just taking cap positions to defend those bases from enemy air attack. Our offensive air arm is better here in the south near Davao. We've got 16 B-17 flying fortresses, and what I'm actually ordering these guys to do, first they're being ordered at 11,000 feet to bomb naval units, but if none of those present themselves, I've also ordered them to target Balob over here. And my hope is I can maybe bomb the port there or something like that if we don't see any better targets, and maybe do some damage to Japanese shipping. This is a key Japanese base for their invasions of the southern Philippines and for their eventual expansion into the Dutch East Indies. This is their best base to support those attacks. Saipan isn't very large. Truk is too far away. This is going to be the main hub of their attacks, so if we can get some bombs in on that and maybe degrade the port facilities or maybe even sink a few ships in harbor, that would be really good for us. Meanwhile, our troops on the Malay Peninsula have started the long slog back to Singapore, so they're starting the march back to Singapore. One of the things I really should do is, for some of these guys, I should just strategic mode transport them. I'm not sure how quickly they can get there, because it's going to take 3 days basically to load them up on railroads. But I should at least move some of these units via strat mode back to Singapore. I didn't do that on turn 1. I'm going to do that here. Again, basically they've got to sit and pack up for a couple of days, but they'll move much more quickly than if they march. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and have them pull back to Singapore on the railroad. These units, because they're the furthest north, I'm going to be ordering them to do that. The Punjab Battalion is going to march on its own. It's moving pretty quickly on its own. And then we'll have the Gurkha Battalion also do that, although they're actually making pretty good time. They'll be here probably next turn. So I'm just trying to think if it's 2 days per hex for them down this railroad line. By the time they pack up, they'll be here. And then even then, I don't know if it's like 40 miles a day. It takes a little bit of time. I think what the enemy's going to do is they're going to land some troops at Kutan, and it's just a question of whether I can evacuate my forces fast enough to get them out of the way. These guys are going to stay as a blocking force here to stop the advance out of Kota Buru. Mainly the troops I'm worried about here are in the north. Not a ton going on with my aircraft over here. Actually, I should set my buffaloes to some cap. We'll set them at 15,000 feet. Escort duty, otherwise they're going to be on cap. We'll set all fighters to that in this base. You can see here we've got quite a few fighters ready, but the quality of the buffalo is pretty crappy. Meanwhile, we've got some Viblisses, which are naval attack units. If they can't attack the Navy, we're just going to rest all of them. And they'll come in at about, let's say, 5,000 feet. They're torpedo bombers, so we'll set them all to that. These guys will be able to damage the enemy if they try and leap for Mersing. That's the one thing that worries me if the Japanese tried to go here, because they'd have a very likely possibility of cutting off all the rest of our troops here in the north of Malay. But the flip side of that is that it would expose them to attack from our air bases at Singapore, and I don't think they've degraded our forces there enough to make that bold of a move. Meanwhile, they did land on Kota Buru, so we're going to go ahead and pull our aircraft that are all the way back north here back to Singapore and evacuate this base, because again, all these aircraft will be destroyed if we don't pull them back. So we'll pull these guys back to Kutan. I don't know if they have torpedoes there. Yeah, it looks like they don't have torpedoes. That's why it's red. But nonetheless, they'll at least bomb the enemy. We'll pull those Hudsons back as well. These guys will go, whoa, all the way back to Singapore, because they can bomb from back there. And hopefully that's... I mean, we've got a few remaining aircraft, but I don't know if they can actually move. Yeah, because it's not reachable. Wait. Stand down. Transfer to base. Everything's negative, so yeah, they can't move because they're damaged, I guess. Meanwhile, we got the most of those aircraft out. I've also ordered some of these vessels over here to pull out of Georgetown. They're basically loading some supplies here, but Georgetown is going to be evacuated. Cargo, there's something else here. I don't know, is it support? I don't know what an HDL is. Is that like a destroyer, minesweeper, mine layer, I guess, actually. So we're going to go ahead and pull these guys back to Singapore. I'm assuming they'll move through the strait. Yes, they will. Okay, so Georgetown is being evacuated. Maybe I'll lay a minefield here near Mersing. Can we do that? Do we have the appropriate forces there for mine laying? We do. We've got a couple of destroyers which are outfitting. They're at system damage 20. I don't think they've actually been hurt. I think it's mainly just... yeah, I don't think they've actually been hurt. I think they're just outfitting or whatever. When you go through like an upgrade of a vessel, it kind of has a system damage you've got to recover from. So we're going to try and lay some mines at Mersing as well to prevent that. Meanwhile, our Task Force Z is retreating south, so they did get bombed. Nothing got hit or damaged. Maybe the Meritus had some system damage. But we're going to go ahead and pull them out to the south towards Surabaya, however you pronounce that. They're not going to react to the enemy ships, because if they do, there's a very real likelihood they may sprint north to try and engage this enemy battleship force, which is kind of tempting, but we'll pull them south. If the enemy wants to try and chase him, then let him. It'll pull him into range of our torpedo bombers, which would be kind of interesting. But I don't want to move further north because it'll expose them to the enemy air bases in Indochina, so we'll avoid that. Meanwhile, just kind of BAU everywhere else. We're not doing much in Australia at the moment. Not much else going on around here. China, I haven't really changed anything from my first turns. I've still got some units in movement trying to attack. There was only one battle which took place over here near Papamu. That unit here got driven back, so I think we're actually going to, if we can try and extricate these guys, we'll try and get them over to this general vicinity. But otherwise, everybody else is kind of doing what they're doing in China. No one's moved yet, so they're all still trying to follow their initial orders. If we move back toward Pearl Harbor, you can see we've got the Lexington Carrier Task Force and the Enterprise, both moving south. Actually, I don't want these guys to move at full speed, so we'll move at mission speed. So both of these guys are moving south here, away from the Japanese who are over here, moving east. So there's a pretty good distance between the Japanese and our own aircraft carriers. The challenge is if he spotted these guys over here and he just bolted south. Well, let's do that. I mean, so fuel is going to be an issue. I can't make it to Pago Pago, which is where I've sort of ordered these guys to if I move at full speed, but I don't know if I need to. My main concern here is making sure that the aircraft carriers get out of harm's way until the Kito-Baru, the Japanese carrier strike force, withdraws. So we'll keep these guys going at max speed. These guys are a little further away, so they'll go a little bit more economical. Meanwhile, our cruiser force will kind of screen a little bit, and they're moving toward Christmas Island, which I have a feeling is where everybody's going to end up going eventually. But the hope is that they just get out of the way in time for the Japanese to kind of decide to withdraw. Meanwhile, to try and encourage that, I've got a suicide mission lined up. It's going to be kind of like John Wayne in Harm's Way. We've got one heavy cruiser and 4 light cruisers, as well as some destroyers that are leaving Pearl Harbor. They're all in good health, and they're going to try and charge north here to deal with the enemy carrier task force. Yeah, they likely will be sitting ducks. I picked a aggressive admiral, John Schaffworth, who is one of my most aggressive but also competent naval officers. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, if they do engage the enemy carrier force, they're going to be heavily outnumbered. The enemy will have battleships. But my hope is, hey, listen, with all those destroyers, maybe get a lucky torpedo or two, torpedo strike or two on the enemy carriers. You could disable them. At the very least, you're encouraging them to get out of there. Meanwhile, in terms of our ships that are in port, you can see here that the battleships didn't actually fare too badly. So the Tennessee and California could yet sink. They both have 80-plus flood damage. The Pennsylvania is at 69, but no one else is really in danger of sinking right now. No one is under uncontrollable fires. No one has huge system damage. This was about the lightest Pearl Harbor strike I've ever seen. The Pennsylvania, California, and Tennessee probably all out of action for at least 3 months each. Probably more with that float damage, assuming they survive. But the West Virginia, the Arizona, the Maryland, I wouldn't be surprised if they're ready in like a month. The Nevada and the Oklahoma, or maybe 2. And the Nevada and the Oklahoma could certainly be ready in a month. They both suffered less than 20 damage. So that's a pretty impressive result for us. Meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and put these guys into the... is there a shipyard option? Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and stand these guys down, put them in the shipyard. Actually, okay, so my timing on this was way out of line. It was completely wrong. If we do put these guys into the shipyard, and you can see 56 major flood damage, it's going to take 272 days for the Tennessee to repair. But we're going to do it anyway, mainly because the flood damage is going to be too high for them to effectively have any chance. Wow, 700. Man. The flood damage is going to be too high for either of those to have a realistic chance of making it back to the coast. But at least in the case of the Nevada, well, that's looking at like, I don't want to do critical, but if I was to do high, it's like 3 weeks for her to be back in action. So I could have both the Oklahoma probably and the in about 3 weeks, I could have 2 of my battleships back to 100%. Meanwhile, we're going to stand these other guys down and hopefully just kind of do some pier side repairs, because these guys aren't going to aren't going to stay here for 3 months. I mean, these guys could be mostly better in 3 months, but they're not going to stay here for 3 months. They're going to end up retreating back to the coast, to the American coast. Once the Japanese carriers sort of clear out of here, we'll go ahead and have most of these guys pull back to California for their more substantial repairs, where we have larger shipyards that should be able to deal with their damage. I'm hoping he doesn't attack again, but you can see here we'll have 2 battleships in 3 weeks, assuming nothing goes wrong. These 4 battleships will probably be repaired inside of, I don't know, 6 months or so. These guys might take a year. We'll see. We may end up, pulling them out of repair and sending them to the East Coast. The issue is I don't really feel comfortable having one of them go with like 68 major damage, because that can't be repaired outside of a shipyard. So we'll see how that all plays out. Meanwhile, the cruisers, we had a couple of damaged cruisers, the Raleigh and the Detroit. The San Francisco and the New Orleans are both actually okay. I'm not having everybody participate in this suicide charge. The Minneapolis has no damage. The San Francisco and the New Orleans could add their guns and their firepower to that attack on the Japanese, but it feels likely that I'm going to lose that force. And if I lose a couple of light cruisers and 1 heavy, that's fine. But I don't want to lose my whole heavy cruiser force that's outside the carrier escorts. And I don't want to lose all my destroyers either. So it's a small force. It's mainly intended to encourage XTRG to withdraw, even if it means a defeat. I'm also pulling a bunch of submarines out of here as well to try and engage the enemy carrier force. And my land-based aircraft, my fighters, are all going to be on cap. So you can see here, they're all on cap. I'm putting a small number of fighters over the top of that cruiser force. Hopefully, in the event that the Japanese launch some airstrikes against them, the cruiser force will have air cover to maybe shoot down some more Japanese aircraft far away from home, and again, give them another reason to withdraw back to the home islands. But that's kind of my plan right now, guys. I mean, that may not be the best plan. I haven't set up all my convoys or anything like that from America. I want the Japanese carrier force to clear out of here before I start putting more of those ships in danger, and I don't think doing anything with that right now will make a huge difference. In the Indian front, I'm going to start putting some aircraft in Lido, and I need to provide some support and supplies there. But I'm going to try and start drawing some supplies here so I can start air ferrying supplies into China. We have the Burma Road right now, but if the Japanese advance and take some of our positions in Burma, if they take Lashio, for example, then they'll cut the Burma Road, which will be a huge blow to our ability to keep China in the war, which is absolutely critical because they're tying down huge numbers of Japanese troops. So we really need to keep China in the war and effective. And you can see here all of these bases here, these red exclamations, these yellow exclamations represent low supply. And that's because China has huge manpower but an inability to supply them with what they need. So this road provides, it's like 600 or maybe it's like 2,000 supply per day. That slowly trickles from sort of into China and toward the front slowly. But ideally, if I can, put a shit ton of transports over here, I can fly supplies into China as well. It's not very efficient. I'll use a lot of my own supplies, but as long as I can, I'm not too worried about the Allied supplies in India. I can always, ship more in around the globe, or I think India generates quite a bit of supply as well. So I'd much rather take that hit and kind of supply China and hopefully get them up there, because the more supply you have, the more reinforcements you can draw. The more reinforcements you can draw, the more effective your units are going to be, etc., etc., etc. So those are kind of the high points here for my turn. I'm also going to do a minefield here in Mersing. I can't remember if I said that earlier or not. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So we'll see how the next turn unfolds, guys. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know if you approve of my strategy. I'm trying to keep my videos a little bit more bite-sized. I'm not going to, show you as I click on every unit and do everything. I want these to be a little bit more viewable. So we'll see how this all works out. But let me know your thoughts, guys, and I appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.